Yo guys, what is good? Welcome back to another episode of my NQT Diaries show. This week has actually flown by, it's disappeared, but it has been a good week. We have had Children in Need, for which we have done some charity events. On Monday, it was Remembrance Day. We've had 2 parents' evenings. I've also had an NQT training course, and there has been so much more to talk about as well. So, without further ado guys, let's get stuck into this video. Okay guys, so on Monday it was Remembrance Day, and last week, at the end of last week, I had the children write a diary entry from the perspective of a fallen soldier back in World War I and World War II, or a nurse. They had the choice. We tea stained some paper to make it have that old effect. They got to screw the paper up a little bit to make it look weathered and aged. I played some videos and we spoke a little bit about what it might be like living in wartime, and there was a nice sort of video from the CBBC that sort of depicted what war was like, but in sort of child-friendly terms. And then they wrote their own sort of diary entry, and it was really nice. And then on Monday, I chose 2 children whose diary entries sounded really good, and they put a lot of effort into it, and they got to read it out to the church for the Remembrance Day service, and that was really nice. One thing that we all respected as teachers was how respectful the children actually were. We have a lot of children in our school that have certain behavioural problems, and sometimes they can't control themselves in certain ways. And actually, when we had the 2-minute silence, every child was completely still, every child was quiet, and they respected that piece, which was brilliant. And as part of that, on Friday for our Rise Assembly, they all got the Respect Award, which was brilliant. So, Tuesday daytime was pretty standard, nothing major to talk about, but Tuesday evening, afternoon, after school, was the first bout of Parents' Evening. In previous meetings with the head, I was told that Parents' Evening, the first one, was just to talk to the parents about how the children have settled into this new year, talk to them about the things that we're doing with them, how we think that they're getting on so far. Obviously they've already had a term, and then to speak to the parents about how they feel their child is getting on, and whether there are any causes for concerns at home. One thing I will say, which I didn't know before turning up and meeting the parents, is that you should take some books with you to put on a table, so that when parents are waiting for their slot, they can have a little look through what their children have been doing. Now, I wasn't told about this, so I just sort of rocked up with my laptop, and I had some, I collected data from the children's work, so how are they doing in their spellings and in their maths. So I was able to talk the parents through some of those stats and say, this is how your child is progressing, this is what we need to work on. But if you are, experiencing your first or, later parents' evenings, try and collect some books, maybe a topic book or maths and literacy, just so that when the parents come in and they're waiting for your appointment, they can have a little look through. And also, when you're talking to the parents, you can talk about the children's work and it's actually in front of them, which is always helpful. Wednesday was a bit different. So Wednesday normally is my PPA and my NQT time, so normally I have the day to plan. But because I had my NQT course this week on the Thursday, I was in on Wednesday. And it was fine. Wednesday was good. It was a bit different teaching on Wednesday because I'm normally not used to it. But the children were brilliant. I think Wednesday we had Odd Sock Day, and Odd Sock Day is to sort of in remembrance for sort of anti-bullying week. And yeah, so everyone wore odd socks. So in that sense, because everyone wore odd socks, the children's activity levels were a bit heightened because they had different coloured socks on and they were all a bit excited by it. But yeah, so I used the opportunity, and if you're watching this, try and keep your eye out for World Kindness Day and days that are sort of dedicated to celebrating or supporting a cause, because it gives you an opportunity, an outlet to teach your children about something. That could be bullying, friendship, that could be, protecting an animal, that could be absolutely anything. So have a little look. When are those days that are sort of supporting a thing, a charity thing or whatever, and then you can use that as a teaching tool, and you can get your children to think and focus on that topic. Alright guys, and then we come to Thursday. Now Thursday obviously was then my NQT time. Now fortunately on Tuesday I had a massive gap in my parents' evening, and so I was able to be proactive, and I did my planning for the next week. So when I had my PPA time, I didn't have my planning to do. So I was still proactive. I had a little bit of a lay-in, I have to admit, but I was still proactive, and I created some sheets for my displays. I personally like to hand draw things. I think that if I can hand draw something and I can label it, it's demonstration to the children that if I can do it, they can do it as well. It looks a bit more original. It's nice for the children to see something that's been done by hand, not just printed off. So I did that, so that on that evening I was then able to pin that up on the working walls for the children to use. And then in the afternoon at 1 o'clock I went to Cheltenham, and I had my NQT sort of science lecture, I suppose, and it was really good. They spoke to us about how we should be teaching our children science, the kind of processes that you can go through in terms of setting up an experiment, the kinds of vocabulary the children should be learning, and how regularly we should be teaching it. Now, if you didn't already know this, my sort of undergraduate degree and my postgraduate degree was in biosciences anyway, and conservation. So actually, when it comes to science, I'm very confident. However, I know a lot of teachers aren't. If you're I know a lot of people, especially NQTs like myself, who are perhaps a bit younger than myself. Ever since they were children, they wanted to be teachers, and so they've only ever known teaching and being around children and childcare. And so actually the idea of teaching science and some of these trickier topics, it can be quite daunting. But it was interesting. They gave us lots of really good resources. There were a couple of websites which I will leave in the description of this video for you. And then Wednesday evening, yes, Wednesday was quite a long day. After I finished my NQT course, I jumped in the car and I drove straight back to school, because it was the second half of my parents' evening. About half of the children's parents actually signed up. I think that's always the case. Sometimes you'll have lots of parents, other times you won't have as many. I do have quite a few parents, well, I say quite a few. I've got about 3 or 4 children in my class whose parents actually work at the school, so they didn't obviously book on because they didn't need to, because if they have any problems or they want me to talk about their child, I can actually just see them during the day, so that's fine. But again, there were no real cause for concerns. There were a couple of parents that had a few concerns about behaviour and friendships, but I'm in a year 3-4 class. Friendships and behaviour, that's something that they are developing. Sometimes they're best friends with people, other times they're not. It's just one of those things. There were a few parents who I raised concerns with, and I think the most important thing to do if you have concerns about a child is obviously to be thoughtful of the fact that this is their parent, but you've got to be honest. There are a few children whose behaviour is not the best, and sometimes their focus in class isn't as good as it could be, and I was open and honest, and I said to the parents, look, they're lovely, however, they can be distractive, they can cause issues both for themselves as well as for the rest of the class. It is something that we're working on, however, I just want you to know that sometimes they can be a bit of a problem in class. Because if the parents don't know, then they're not going to be able to do anything about it at home. They might know, they might not, but you need to give the parents the opportunity to talk to their child about how they're behaving. But yeah, altogether it was all good, and because obviously I had the first experience on the Tuesday, I brought books in and it was a much more smooth event. Just a shame, I finished at about 7:30 and I didn't get home until 8 o'clock. It was a long day. Okay guys, and then we come to Friday. Now Friday was a pretty good day. The second half of the day was actually fairly unstructured, and I will talk about that in a second. The first part of the day, maths. We've been working through column subtraction and column addition, and I will be moving the children onto multiplication and division next week and the week after. But I needed to make sure that I could twist it for the children and test them. So I came up with some word problems, and it was really interesting that just by adding sort of sums and changing it so that it's in a different format, how much more challenging that is for the children. Even some of my sort of really switched on year 4 really struggled with the concept of extracting data from even a paragraph, a very small section of words, and it was really interesting. So if you are in a position where you've got some children that are really switched on, and no matter how hard you challenge them, they kind of finish the work and they get it right, Try some sort of more challenging word puzzles, missing number problems, that kind of thing. And it really makes them think, and it really makes them dive deeper into their understanding of what it is that they're doing. So that is a good piece of advice that I've been given, and it might help you too. For literacy, we've been looking a lot at SPAG, spelling, punctuation and grammar, and we've kind of got to the end of that over the last 2 weeks. And so on Friday I introduced the children to newspapers. Over the next week or two, the children are going to be creating their own newspaper articles and looking at what they need to do, what newspaper articles are, how they're laid out. So I bought a couple of newspapers from the supermarket. One thing I will say, most newspapers are not appropriate for children, so if you're going to do this, as I had to do, read through the newspaper, look at what the article's about, and you're going to have to cut some pages out so that they're only appropriate for children. There used to be a children's newspaper about. I remember when I was young there was like a child-focused one, but I don't think it's about anymore, so I'm not really sure. But yeah, so they cut up newspaper, they spoke about it, they wrote about it, and they got to read the articles, and then next week that will set them up to create their own. And then essentially on Friday afternoon, the reason why it was fairly unstructured because half of the afternoon is their golden time anyway, but before we did that, in sort of the hour slot just before that, after lunch, we read through and spoke about the Christmas play. Now, Key Stage 2 run the Christmas play. The Year 5 and 6 teacher, she wrote it because she's the English lead and she's actually very good at that kind of thing. So she wrote this sort of play that was based off of the school. So all of the teachers are involved in it, and it's kind of like a special edition. The children get to play the teachers, and it's all quite funny. And we spoke through it, we read through the play, and we basically opened it up to the children. You know, do they have any questions? If they want to apply and go for a role, they can do. And yeah, so we spoke about that. And we've obviously got about 5 weeks left until the end of term, and in the last week of term, that is when we are performing in the church to everyone, so to parents and things like that. So we need to make sure that every Friday we meet up, we practice, we rehearse, and then the afternoon before we perform it, we're doing a dress rehearsal. So Fridays from now on, they're going to be quite hectic. It's going to be full of sort of rehearsals and plays and Christmas orientated stuff. So yeah, that's what we did on Friday afternoon. Right guys, so that was my week. It was a hectic week, it was long, but it disappeared because I was busy and we had so much going on. I have been advised that this Christmas term is very full on, and so what I advise you to do watching this, we're only 2 weeks into the term, we've got another 5 or 6 weeks left. Make sure that you are prepared and you're plan in advance. A popular saying of mine is, fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So make sure that you've thought about your planning, make sure you thought about everything that you need to do in preparation for Christmas. That goes for academic as well as for, like, you know, the Christmas fairs and things like that. And the sooner that you can get on top of things, the better you are, and it means that you'll have a smoother term. It is a shorter term than the first one, but it's still quite long for the children. And obviously in the last few weeks, everything is going to be Christmas mad and Christmas focused. We break up on the 20th, which is just 5 days before Christmas Day. So obviously the children are going to be at that sort of pinnacle of like, can't wait for Christmas. It's going to get colder, it might snow, we're going to have like Christmas decorations up in class. So yeah, it could be quite full on and quite distracted for the children. So just bear that in mind when you are getting ready for the end of this term. Right, I'm going to stop rambling now. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you have, you know what to do. Hit that like button. If you want to keep up with all of this kind of content as well as other things I do, obviously I don't just talk about teaching, I talk about other things as well. Consider subscribing, guys. And if you want to know anything else, comment down below. Like I say, look in the description, go check out those free resources, go and have a look and see if they'll help you with your science work. And next time, guys, I will see you soon. I will see you next time. Peace.